Ambassador Keshap, if I can begin with you, give us a sense, give our audience a sense of the role that the Indian diaspora has played in bringing US-India close together through the ups and downs over the last 2 decades. And you know, one critical assessment that we always get in the media, we're always excited, always proud when a member of Indian diaspora becomes a member of the Congress or becomes the Vice President of America or becomes the head of state for any country for that matter. But we're always told, to be realistic, that that person stands for that country's interest first. Having said that, how does the Indian diaspora bring the two countries together? Give us a sense.
Pariksha, thank you very much. May I, if you'll indulge me, may I tell another story?
Sure.
All right, I have this story from 2 absolutely reliable witnesses, and so I feel confident in retelling it. And it is a story that goes back to the era when candidate George W. Bush was running for President of the United States. And there was a gathering in Crawford at the ranch where all of these Republican graybeards were brought in. Dr. Rice assembled them, and they had a symposium about foreign policy. And they talked for hours and hours about many things, Middle East, Russia, China, this and that. And at the end of it all, as the story has been told to be by 2 reliable eyewitnesses, candidate Bush asked this group, he said, "What about India? None of you mentioned India." And they said, "Well, you know, India, I don't know, like it's got potential, but we're not there yet." And he said, "Well, no, hear me out. In my state, in Texas, everywhere I go, in all these small towns all around Texas, every town has an Indian doctor who's one of the most important citizens in that town and provides a critical service in these very remote communities. And there's all these Indians that have moved to Texas and are, you know, pillars of the community. So I'd like to know more about India." Now, I tell the story because I think the Indian American community has succeeded famously, as you've mentioned, Vice President Harris, of course, being our leading member. But Indians have also worked very hard to be respectful, law-abiding citizens in the United States and to work to their full potential within a system that rewards potential. And so as this community has grown and become more influential, and as Americans have woken up to India beyond, you know, the elephants and the tigers and all that, but realized what India really is and what it represents, that community has been privileged to have a very important voice in helping steer the thinking of Americans about India. India, of course, itself, as a responsible stakeholder in world affairs, a net provider of global security and peace, a constructive member of the international community, has polished its own reputation in so many ways. And so for Indian Americans, it's a really easy pitch to talk to congressmen and senators, bureaucrats about the importance of the relationship. To your question, though, I'd like to mention that in the era of breakout possibility, and Ambassador Shringla remembers this very well, in the era of the nuclear deal, there were 2 diasporas that did incredible service to advance the U.S.-India relationship. One was the, of course, Indian American community. The other was the American Jewish community. And so those 2 diasporas have helped propel this relationship to where it is, and they serve, I think, as guardians for ensuring that the U.S.-India relationship can grow and thrive and become even stronger in the century to come. Thank you.
Right. Thanks so much, Ambassador Keshap. High Commissioner Mackay, if I can come to you now. You told us about at least 2 million people of Indian origin there in Canada contributing to the economy. If we were to ask you about how they have contributed to Canada over the last 2 decades, what would be some of the key contributions according to you? And we also believe there are 19 parliamentarians and 3 ministers of Indian origin in the cabinet.
Well, I think India's on the agenda in Canada always. And maybe I'll just give some examples of the Canada-India business relationship, which is about more than just the diaspora, but really the diaspora is at the heart of it. And I know, by the way, the greatest champion of this, we have in the back of the room Victor Thomas, who's the head of the Canada-India Business Council, a sponsor here. So let me give a shout out to him and to the CIBC. So we now have a bilateral commercial relationship of nearing $125 billion. That's led by almost $90 billion of Canadian institutional investment into India. That's the big Canadian pension plans. CPPIB and CDPQ, et cetera, and organizations like Brookfield Asset Management, Fairfax Financial, who have collectively put $90 billion into infrastructure, into renewable energy, all across the country, manufacturing, et cetera. And one of the key investors, of course, is Prem Watsa, founder of Fairfax. He's a perfect example of just the kind of diaspora citizen we want to see. Came to Canada in the 1960s, successful in the insurance business, then had enough capital that he created a capital investment company. He's now put $7 billion into India. Last year, at the Indiaspora forum just here, he said that he was likely to double his investment over the next 5 years. And I'm hearing just the same thing from the Canadian pension plans and Brookfield as well. So it's that kind of leadership that can take the Canada-India commercial relationship forward, and that's led by the diaspora.
Right. Thank you so much, High Commissioner Mackay, for those remarks. Emily, if I can get you in at this stage. Yes, we're discussing the contribution of the diaspora to the Australian economy, the cultural exchanges between the two countries. But today in the world, and especially after the pandemic, everyone is looking for a trusted supply chain partner. India is also rising, and the image of India is coming across as a country which can be a trusted partner in the world. India and Australia have signed a FTA very, very recently. Our trade will only go up. Give us a sense of the opportunities this is bringing to the Indian diaspora, and to what extent has the Indian diaspora contributed to our economic relations to where they are today?
Thank you so much, and absolutely I want to recognise the importance of the trade relationship between Australia and India. We were really pleased to enter into our ECTA, our Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement, in December last year, and we're working very dedicatedly towards the further iteration of that, which we hope to conclude this year. More broadly, I think it can't be underestimated how important the diaspora has been to fostering those economic connections between Australia and India. Back home, we did some research. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade produced a report called Australia's Indian Diaspora, a National Asset, which really highlights how Indian Australian groups are uniquely placed to contribute across sectors of significance in our relationship with India. And it's really helped us better understand exactly those contributions. And it found that the Indian diaspora is a really rich source of dynamism and enterprise. It's really well represented across the business community, including in key sectors like bilateral economic relationship, like health, like tourism, ICT, resources, and sectors with really strong export potential. And as our ties with India continue to gain ground, the diaspora is really, those networks have really demonstrated their readiness to contribute further with their expertise and entrepreneurialism to the economic relationship. They have the connections, they have the language skills, and they have that know-how that's really relevant to understanding India's complex markets, as well as influencing Australia's perception within them. So, in short, we're really lucky to have nearly 4% of our population really boosting our trade relationship.
Right. Thanks, Emily, for putting the India-Australia partnership in the context of the Indian diaspora for us. Ambassador Gilon, if I were to ask you, 85,000, you corrected me earlier that there are 85,000 people of Indian origin in Israel. One thing is very clear from the panel is that when it comes to the Indian diaspora, these are people that we would always consider as our friends. We can rely on them for advice to put our word forward in a friendly, in a gentle manner to their host countries. But when it comes to the G20, and right now it is the final lap, when we need consensus, when we need countries on board, if we need to solve the biggest problems of our time, what role can a diaspora play, can the Indian diaspora play in convincing their host countries about India's agenda?
Well, as you said, it's about 1% of the population of Israel is of Indian origin. I think that the secret of our very intimate relations are the people-to-people part. I mean, that's the strong basis. I've been a diplomat in quite many countries. I've seen quite big pockets, strong pockets of support to Israel, but the wide support that you see here in India is very unique, I believe. And the Indians, Indian diaspora in Israel, immigrated to Israel relatively early when Israel was established. And the Indian culture was part and parcel of the Israeli culture, be it Bollywood films that on our only one channel of TV were broadcast quite often, be it Indian food. Now Rina Pushkarna, the lady who brought Indian food to Israel in the 70s, was awarded by the president the highest award. So I think this is the very strong link that enables our two countries really to work together.
Thank you very much to all our panelists for joining us and everyone in the audience. It's been a fantastic discussion. But thank you so much for joining us here. It's been fantastic, and clearly the Indian diaspora has contributed a lot, and there's lots to do after the G20 concludes on the 10th of September. Thanks once again.